Hello, my name is BurgerBrush and this is my Divine Ire Inquisitor for Project Builds. Project Builds is a project I made where I make a viable League starter to endgame character out of every ascendancy in the game. They can all be played with a very minimum budget up to tier 10 maps, and then as you progress, you keep investing and you will be able to reach and complete most of the endgame content in Path of Exile. Most of the information for this character, such as skill tree, ascendancy choices, Pantheon choices, gear, leveling, and general information can all be found in the forum guide that is linked below in this video's description. I've structured all my project build characters with 3 different phases. Phase 1 is for League start or minimum budget where you can clear up to tier 10 maps. Phase 2 is when you progress and keep investing a little bit of currency into the character and will be able to clear up to tier 16 maps. And phase 3 is when you keep investing and start to really finish up the character, and you will be able to clear most of the endgame content in Path of Exile. Different builds excel at different things, such as map clearing at a high speed or bossing and so on, and this character is pretty well rounded for all content. It has a decent map clearing ability, it kills bosses pretty well, and the survivability is pretty good, and the more you keep investing, the more the bossing and the survivability is going to scale up very well and nice. I managed to kill all 4 Conquerors at Awakener 8 at tier 16 with this character, and I've also managed to kill Cirrus. Now, the Cirrus kill took me a while though, so before attempting Cirrus at Awakener 8, I do suggest investing a little bit more than I did. And at the end of this video, I will show some quick clips of me attempting more endgame content with some more min-maxed gear than I suggested in the build currently, so you can see that this character also had a pretty high ceiling for investment and that you're being rewarded for investing more in the build. So let's quickly go over about how we scale our damage and kind of what this character is all about. So first of all, we're playing the Inquisitor Ascendancy, and Inquisitor we are going Righteous Providence, Inevitable Judgment, Sanctuary, and Pious Path. And the reason we do this is because Righteous Providence gives crit chance against enemies that are not affected by elemental ailments, and then Critical Strike Multiplier against enemies that are affected by elemental ailments. And we basically inflict all kinds of elements. We inflict chill, frozen, shocked, we even inflict ignite I think as well, so we basically inflict all these kinds of things, and a lot of these things boost our damage by a lot. But the main thing is that we are a crit chance and a crit multi-focus build because of this as well. Critical strikes ignore enemy monster elemental resistances, and in Path of Exile, monster elemental resistances can be very tough for elemental builds to actually do damage. But whenever we deal critical strikes, we completely ignore that though, and we penetrate so much elemental resist, so we do so much damage. So Inevitable Judgment and Righteous Providence is a great way for us to deal a lot of damage. Then increased effect of non-damaging ailments increases our shock effect as well, which gives us another damage boost. Now, another really good thing about this build that's very important is Sanctuary and Pious Path. Sanctuary creates concentrated ground when we're stationary, so whenever we're standing still we have concentrated ground. You see this like little broken thing underneath us. Whenever we stand still we get it. And concentrated ground increase damage taken by enemies if they're standing on it. So like if we have like an enemy around like this vicinity here in the area, they also take increased damage. We generate more mana so we can keep up our mana when we're channeling Divine Ire, because Divine Ire is a channeling skill and it costs 6 mana per second to channel. So you can see here the mana is like going up and down, but we can still like sustain a good amount of mana even though we're just holding down. And another thing that is so good with this is Pious Path. 20% increased attack speed and cast speed while on concentrated ground. And Divine Ire gains charges and stacks. And the more charges / stacks that you have, we're going to call it stacks, the more damage you do when you release the final beam. So a beam of 10 isn't going to be as powerful as a beam of 15. And a beam of 5 isn't going to be that powerful at all really. But if you get a beam of 20, that's the maximum amount of damage we can have. You can see that our character kind of like lights up with like this fire ignited kind of thing. And that's what we mainly want to do whenever we release a Divine Ire onto a boss or something. We want to get to 20 stacks and then we want to release the beam in their face basically. When you're map clearing you can release like 5 and 10 and you're going to be clearing just fine. But the main thing about this is that you gain stacks faster depending on your attack speed. So if you get a lot of attack speed, you can hit 20 stacks really fast. And another thing also is that concentrated ground you create grants immunity to elemental ailments. So we don't have to worry about getting shocked ourselves or getting ignited or getting frozen or chilled. A lot of builds you can get frozen sometimes, you have to rely on flasks for this, but as long as we're standing still, we don't have to care about that. And the best thing as well with this is that we generate 280 shields, so it's really good defensively on top of that over the elemental ailments as well. But effects of concentrated ground you create linger for 4 seconds. So we don't have to stand still for all these effects to be active. We can move around and we still have it for 4 seconds. And the good thing about Divine Ire is that every time we move around and we stand still, we instantly gain it while we're channeling again. We have it for 4 seconds, I stand still, and we have it. 4 seconds again. A channel, and we have it again. We have it basically all the time, because we always at some point stand still to release a Divine Ire beam. And that works great with this build in that sense. Now, another really important thing about this build is that stun immunity is very important for many characters because it's so good defensively, because otherwise if you get stunned, you can get absolutely hammered down by damage. And a channeling skill, if you get stunned, it's going to instantly release whatever stacks that you have on your beam, and you're not going to be able to reach 20 stacks sometimes if you keep getting stunned. So stun immunity is really important, and that's why I have lucidity. So 40% chance to avoid being stunned while channeling. And we also have Arcane Swiftness, which gives us avoid being stunned while holding a shield. And then on top of that, I also use the chance to avoid being stunned on the helmet, so we can reach like closer to 100% stun immunity on this build. And we basically never get stunned and we don't have to worry about those things, and it's also really great defensively. Now, another thing about the build is that we focus very heavily on power charges for our damage. So we have all the power charges that we can obtain here. And then we also have Disciple of the Forbidden. Power charges adds more critical strike chance and so on, and that gives us a lot of damage along with Inevitable Judgment. And we also use power charge and critical support, so supported skills deal more damage per power charge, so if you have a lot of power charges, means a lot of damage. And then last but not least as well, we focus very heavily on converting our damage. So we have physical damage converted to cold damage on our gloves. Divine Ire itself converts 50% of physical damage over to lightning, and then we convert a little bit more lightning over to a little bit more physical over to lightning here as well. So we basically convert 100% of our physical damage over to elemental damage, and that is so important because we penetrate elemental resistances. So we really want to convert all our damage over to elemental, which also gives a damage multiplier when doing that. And then we penetrate all those resistances as well, and we deal a great amount of damage. And last but not least that I want to talk about is kind of how Divine Ire works. Divine Ire is a channeling skill that you also, when you're channeling it, you can release a large beam in front of you. Wherever you're targeting, you can release a large beam in that area. But another thing about Divine Ire is that when you're channeling it, you have a large AoE circle around you. And this also works for damaging enemies within this circle. And one thing that is super important, as I've already talked about, is trying to get 20 stacks of Divine Ire as soon as possible, releasing it, and then charging it up again. But a really interesting thing about Divine Ire is that when you have a rare or unique enemy within the circle, you gain an additional stage, as you can see at the last line of when you look at the Divine Ire skill gem. And a 40% chance to gain an additional stage when hitting a normal or magic enemy. So basically, if we go up to a pack of mobs and we start channeling, we actually do the damage around us even though we don't hit them. And whenever you have an enemy within this area, either if it's like a normal pack or even a boss, you're going to generate charges faster. So whenever you're killing a boss, for example, you want to make sure that the boss is inside the circle, get up to 20 stacks, release the beam, and then do the same thing again up to 20 stacks and release the beam. And one very important thing about this character that I felt when playing it is that defensively, you're kinda in a bad position whenever you're standing still and you're channeling, because this game is a lot about attack animations and projectiles. So what I do a lot is that I walk up to a pack of mobs, I channel, I release, and after I'm finished releasing, I instantly try to dash in another direction. Because usually what happens is that melee enemies, they are currently swinging their weapon against you, or ranged enemies are shooting projectiles. So before they can even hit you, you can actually maneuver a lot of the incoming damage by dodging it, by releasing a beam and then dashing immediately. Releasing a beam and dashing. So this is currently how I play my character a lot. I release a beam and then I dash. I release a beam and then I dash. And this way you can really avoid a lot of incoming damage, and you will be much more safer out when you're mapping or doing bosses, because if they even miss your attacks, then how the hell are you even going to take damage in the first place? There are some key items that I've chosen for this build that I've built the character around overall. And it starts with the Light of Lunar's Jingling Spirit Shield. The reason why I've chosen this is because it adds 10% more chance to block, so it gives 33% chance to block overall. And it gives 1% critical strike multiplier per 1% chance to block attack damage. So we stack a lot of block attack damage chance in the build, which gives us a lot of critical strike multiplier and obviously a nice defensive layer with all the block attack damage chance that we have as well. The second key item is the Gifts from Above Diamond Ring, another cheap and easily obtained item that gives us increased damage while on concentrated ground, which we are all the time, and once again, chance to block attack damage while on concentrated ground is the main thing that we're going for here. Then the ring also adds some crit chance and some other pretty boring stuff. One of the key flasks that we use is the Rumis Concoction Granite Flask. It adds armor for defensiveness, but it also adds more chance to block attack damage, which is good defensively for us and gives us a lot of damage because it adds crit multi. Now the wand I've chosen is the Void Battery Prophecy Wand. It increases spell damage, which increases our damage overall. It gives you cast speed and increased global critical strike chance. And the main thing that it really does as well is that it gives us another power charge. And we stack power charges, and and we also get more spell damage per power charge. So when we're stacking power charges, this one gives us an incredible amount of damage. Now for gloves, I suggest that you pick up a fingerless silk glove because it gives spell damage on the implicit. And the main thing that you want on your gloves is life, any form of resistances, and physical damage converted to cold damage craft as well. Now for boots, I suggest Hunter Influence boots with Tailwind, because Tailwind adds more cast speed and movement speed as well, which is going to make the build feel overall greater to clear speed and also better for damage as well, because cast speed gives us faster charges on the Divine Ire. Now the main stats that you want on the boots is life, movement speed, and resists. For the amulet, I suggest getting dexterity because we struggle a little bit with dexterity, so stats such as dexterity, like a jade amulet, is perfect. And then the main stats that we're looking for is life and critical strike multiplier, and if you can, cast speed or crit chance. Now for our belt, I'm going a pretty standard thing here, going with a Stygian Vice because it has an abyssal socket, and the main stats that you want is life and resists. For the abyssal jewel that you're going to put in your Stygian Vice, I suggest life, energy shield, and 4% or whatever chance to gain onslaught for 4 seconds on kill, because this gives us once again more cast speed, more movement speed, so better clearing and better for bossing as well. For the second ring, I suggest an opal ring because it has elemental damage on the implicit, and I suggest as your main stats, life, resists. For the armor, I think one of the main important things about this build when you want to start min-maxing it is that you need to have a Shaper or Hunter influenced Val Regalia. I would say is the best base, but just a Shaper or Hunter influenced armor overall, with the spells have increased to critical strike chance. This is very important because this adds a lot of damage to our Divine Ire, because Divine Ire deals critical strikes much more often, so we can penetrate damage. And you want to pair it with life and energy shield if you can, but mainly life. And then you want to craft gain 9 to 10% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. For the helmet, I suggest a Warlord influenced helmet, and preferably a Hue Recircular because it has a good energy shield base. And the main thing that you want is either maximum power charges from the Warlord influence, or you want global critical strike multiplier from the Warlord influence. And if you can't get any of those, there's also elemental damage as well. But that's the least favorite, and you should focus on power charges first, or crit multi, and then elemental damage. If you can get all of them or 2 of them, that's great as well. And the main stats that you want on top of that is life, resists, and if you can, energy shield. And I highly suggest, if you can and you have an open slot to craft, that you craft chance to avoid being stunned. Now, another flask that is super great for us to use is the Series Promise. We gain 19% of physical damage extra chaos damage and gain 14% elemental damage extra chaos damage during effect. Now the numbers may vary on your flask, etc, but the main thing is that we gain more damage as extra chaos damage during effect. And even though we convert all our physical over to elemental, these things like gain percentage of physical damage extra chaos, they calculate before the conversion. So we gain more damage and then we once again more damage with the Series Promise. So it's a great flask for damage, and also add some Chaos Rest for defensiveness. And once again, I suggest that if you have the Shaper Armor, that you go and pick up a Taste of Hate Sapphire Flask, because this one also has gain percentage of physical damage as extra cold damage during effect, which is a large damage increase. The rest of the gear, such as jewels and other flasks, can be found in the build guide on the forum as well. Now, enjoy this quick little montage of me killing some endgame bosses in Path of Exile, and just a quick thing as well, the gear that I'm using in these clips are basically phase 3 gear, so they're nothing over the top or anything super expensive. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe here on YouTube. Also, go check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/burgerbrush, where I stream Path of Exile almost daily and sometimes even variety games. Remember that we also have a Discord where you can ask any Path of Exile related question, and if you ever need help with any build or character in Path of Exile, feel free to swing by the Twitch channel and we'll help you out. Also, if you're looking for a guild, we have an open guild in Softcore Trade League. Thanks once again, and I'll see you around.